Yeah, Scott wants to welcome everyone to the SEMA Collision Repair and Refinish stage, where today we're going to talk a little bit about PPE, personal protective equipment, and how to protect yourself when you're in the shop environment or working with any type of chemicals or products that might adversely affect your health. And I'm Jeff Poole from the iCar Tech Center in Appleton, Wisconsin.
I'm Scott Caboose with iCar.
I'm Jason Black from iCar.
And Scott Van Hooley from iCar, now that my microphone's working. So today we're going to talk a little bit on PPE, and we want to start off with where that technician's mindset is around PPE. So Jeff, why don't you lead us off?
So this is something that I have to be open and candid with. Having been in the industry for many years, there are many times where I caught myself out in the shop working with chemicals and perhaps not wearing the gloves, not wearing the respirator, and I'm paying for it now. Now that's something that as you look at PPE and you think about all the different products we work with, and whether it's products or whether it's the byproduct of welding process or anything else that's going on, that might not be a short-term effect. That's something that you may pay for later in your life, and that's a lottery ticket that you don't want to buy.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not always intentional. I know, like for me, a lot of times I had my respirator on, and I've got 8 or 9 or 10 cars to paint that day, and I go to the frame rack to talk to somebody, or I go talk to the body man, I talk to Scott, I do whatever, I go to the bathroom, I lay my respirator down, and I got another car to paint. I can't find my respirator, and next thing you know, I got to get this thing painted. And it's not very smart, but I can't sit here and say I didn't do it. As I got older, I did that less and less because, like you said, you start feeling it a little bit more.
One thing I've noticed working with a lot of colleges and high schools and stuff like that, the younger generation is much better at it than our generation was. And I think the little kudos to the instructors on that for pushing that as hard as they are. And I think the students are understanding that, hey, maybe I'm not going to die before I'm 30, and maybe I want to be healthy when I'm in my 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Well, and I know for me, the one thing that I'm noticing now that I hit the big 4-0, it's a lot harder to hear a lot of different things. Between, you get busy doing different things. You don't think about, oh, I need to use my air hammer to rip something apart, cut a hood open because it's smashed in. I ain't got time to go get the earplugs or earmuffs, so it's not that bad. It's not for very long. But I'm discovering in crowds, and especially with women, with the higher voices and things like that, it's a lot harder to hear. Sometimes that's a good thing, but...
Right, yeah.
I'd get my wife to come scream at you.
You'll hear that.
So let's get into the slides a little bit. So starting off with limit or removing the source. Jason, let's start off with this.
So, we do want to filter the source too. We want to filter it, but the less we have to filter, the better off we are. So I know a lot of us that are a little bit older have maybe painted a car in a garage, and that you can't even hardly see what you're doing, right? Because all that overspray's there. And we went to cross draft paint booths, and it wasn't that much better. Now we've got downdraft paint booths, things like that. The more of that source, that chemical we can eliminate and not try to filter, the better off we are. That doesn't mean that we don't wear our respirator, we don't wear the other stuff, but the more we can get rid of, the better off we are. And there's so much technology today. So like with this slide, we got vacuum sanding systems. And back when these first came out, they were very expensive, and you had to run them like throughout your whole shop. But that's not the case anymore. You've got so many different options, and here at SEMA, a lot of these vendors are really showcasing a lot of their sanding systems and things like that. A lot of people don't even know that there's air purifying welding helmets to get that out of the system.
Tell you what, if you do a lot of welding, and if you've never used one of those, I got the opportunity to use one a few years back, and I don't know why I didn't invest in one as a technician years before. It was just a huge difference in the in-helmet environment of having that air flowing in and a positive pressure that's being filtered, and helping to keep the lens from fogging up, and there's so many benefits to it, as well as keeping all those bad fumes from that welding process out.
It's amazing how many technicians I see that don't understand when you strike that arc on that car, you've got galvanized metal, you've got paints, you've got everything else that's on that car that's burning off. And all of those fumes that your painter says, hey, I'm going to wear a respirator because I don't want to breathe this stuff. Now you're igniting it, burning it, vaporizing it, and breathing it. So welding respirators, I think, are way underused. And if you have the wherewithal to get the supplied air units, man, what a difference that makes in your life.
You know, I think of the shops that, especially in the cooler climates, that are fully closed up during the winter time, and the doors only open for the shortest period possible whenever it's negative 20 out. And walking into that shop environment and you see that haze that's about 3 or 4 foot above the floor, you know, and that's exactly that output from that welding process. That's those burn components that are in the air. And you know, I used to teach the worker protection class for ICAR many times, and you know, one of my little comments that I would make is, you've got that shaft of sunlight coming in a window, and all of that dust and smoke and whatever you see in that shaft of sunlight, well, you know, the dust and smoke are smart. They stay in the sunlight, right? So if I stay out of the sunlight, we're okay. No, it doesn't work that way. You are in that environment breathing all of that, and that's not good for you in any way. I think another positive benefit to these vacuum sanding systems is also keeping the customer's car cleaner. You know, we can try to bag and tape off and everything as best we can, and hopefully we're doing a good job of that. But that dust has a way of getting into places that makes it really difficult to clean up later on. So beyond our health, that customer's satisfaction and cleanliness of their vehicle, all of this has positive benefits all the way around.
That's a good point.
So moving on to some of the fume extractors and, you know, the up-to-date filters in a spray booth. You have the proper airflow and getting all that kind of stuff going through. So let's just spend a little bit of time for the painters out there, because I think that's one area that we don't talk about enough in general. So Scott, you want to give us some thoughts on that?
Painters just don't get any love, do they? They just get all the gravy. But yeah, I mean, maintaining your paint booth, it's going to give you a better environment, not only for yourself, but also for the vehicles that you're working on. You've got to keep those filters in the proper locations. You've got to use the 98% or better filtration. Keep your booth sealed off. Going to make a big difference. You're still spraying paint. Even with the highest transfer efficiency equipment out there, you're still atomizing liquids that are harmful to your body. And you're still going to wear your respirator. But the less that we get in the air, the more of it we get out of the air quickly, the less chance it has to get into your body. So, yeah, the filtration and the transfer efficiency is huge. I remember the old spray guns where we were spraying at like 52 PSI, and it was just creating a cloud. And now we've got that dialed way down, and we're seeing a lot less overspray in that booth.
So I think most of the refinish techs today are probably doing the full suit with the hood, potentially a supplied air system that helps with that environment that they're spraying in to some degree. Positive pressure type, covering all of their skin, making sure nothing's exposed. You know, again, any exposed skin is where some of those chemicals can land on you and be absorbed into your body, into your bloodstream, affecting your health in sometimes unknown ways and sometimes known ways that are bad.
Well, one thing I still see when I go into shops is, okay, they're suited up, they got all the supplied air, everything on when they're spraying. Then they walk out of that booth, they go into that mix room, and they're going to clean their gun, and they take it off. What's your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, the mixing room, that's a pretty high potency place. Granted, we should have the good ventilation and all, but that doesn't absolve us from still wearing our PPE, so we're not exposed, even if it's a short term, to all the chemicals and fumes that are present in that environment.
Well, and there's another big benefit to transfer efficient spray guns, and that's the fact that paint is not cheap. Paint it's got higher and higher, and the more efficient your spray guns are, the less money you're going to spend in paint. So there's a benefit all the way around. And I know me and you, Scott, we talked about how we don't think that welding fume extractors are being used near enough in the shops. Because that not only helps the technician, but like you talked about where you go through and people are welding, it also maybe the person coming from the office that is not wearing a respirator, maybe it helps protect them because it gets that out of the whole environment.
So the welding fume extractors is something that we should seriously consider in our working environment. And I can speak from experience here that having a fan blowing on what you're welding doesn't help the weld at all. It might be moving those fumes someplace else in the shop, but typically these welding fume extractors, they will have filtration built in. So even though they're dumping that air back into the shop environment, they're putting it through high efficiency filtration, so it's cleaning that air up as it's drawing in those fumes.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fan. The other side effect of that is you're also blowing your shielding gas away from your weld, which can be a problem in itself.
It didn't help my welds at all.
Yeah. So, and I know earlier in the week we had Tony Larimer from SADA over here talking about how fine they can atomize the spray gun particles, and to the point where you can actually fill in a stone chip where you got that pattern extremely low and you're only doing that so you're not spraying out as much to blend it in and fixing those stone chips at the same time. So there's a lot of really advanced techniques out there that they've gotten those spray guns tuned in to such a degree that the level of control that they have now compared to 20 years ago is pretty astounding. So respirators.
Well, we talk about it, and everybody kind of knows common sense. You should wear your respirator when you paint a car. Whether you do or not, you should. But, you go into shops, and all the time you see people sanding the car without a respirator, sanding the body filler. We talked about you paint with it, and then you go clean the gun, you take it off. Well, all those cases, it's great you wore it when you painted the car, but you're still hurting yourself. Even when you're blowing off a car, because all those particles are not good for you. So I just wanted to kind of put a little slide together and say, what other times do you think we need to be wearing a respirator?
So you made the reference of blowing off a car, and that's, in my mind, in some ways a little old school. I fill that shoes very well.
Right.
But I look at changing the mindset of how we do what we do, and with those vacuum collection systems, dust collection systems, as we minimize what we generate, and instead of, I'll say, blowing off the body work, but use the vacuum attachment then to clean that off and not generate that dust cloud in the shop. Whether you're working in the environment all day long, or if somebody in the office that just comes out now and then, many of us have worked around many of these chemicals for so long, we may be a little insensitive to the smell of them and things of that nature. And as my wife walks into the garage, she's like, "What's that smell?" It's horrible, and I don't smell anything. It's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe I've been working around those a little too much without the respirator. Once you get away from it for a while, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I can smell that again. So even if you're not in the shop constantly, you still need to think about this, because once you walk out in the shop, the technicians don't stop working. They keep working and doing whatever it is they're doing, and the different particles or fumes or whatever's in the air from whatever operations they're doing, they're present.
Yeah, anytime somebody walks in the shop I'm at, they're like, "Oh my God, how can you stand that smell?" I'm like, "What? I don't smell anything," But yeah, we get immune to it, and you're right. That's probably because we haven't always wore our respirators when we needed to.
Well, I know, the body man and the painters, they don't understand how the mechanics can be in all the grease and oil, and the mechanics could never understand how we could stand the fumes and dust, and it's just a different mindset from the different sides of the house.
Yeah, that rear differential gear oil is just a special kind of.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to eye protection. I know this was probably one of my worst ones that I'm guilty for, because I have contacts now, but I have glasses, and I didn't have contacts for a lot of time, and the glasses were kind of sort of okay because I could still see what I was doing. It helped a little bit, but when you had to wear the safety glasses over the top, that usually didn't happen, and I'm lucky that I didn't have something really bad happen to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, going to the emergency room at 2 o'clock in the morning is no fun, because you get that little particle in your eye during the day, and it just bugs you a little bit, but you've got work to do. But once you get home and you're getting ready to go to sleep, that's whenever it really starts to bother you, and off to the emergency room you go, and they got to fish it out.
Yeah, so especially with welding. So the arc from welding is going to burn your eye almost instantaneously. I had it happen to me once. I had a lens that had a crack in it. I didn't know it, and I was welding for 3 or 4 hours. I got home and my eyes were just sore. And I woke up like 2 o'clock in the morning. It felt like somebody was pouring sand in my eye.
Yeah.
Off to the doctor we go the next morning, and he basically said, "Boy, this is really sucked for you for about 2 or 3 days."
Yep.
He really couldn't do much about it.
You know, and it sounds like a simple subject, but to this day, that's still the number one injury in body shops is your eyes. Whether it's burns like you're talking about, or metal in the eye, something of that nature. Even painting, all that, if you're wearing the traditional mask without any goggles, all that oversprays, all those isocyanates, they are going in through your eyeballs. And you get done, and your eyes are really dry. It's all those chemicals are entering your body through your eye sockets, and so that's another thing that's not good. So like I say, it seems like a very simple solution, but it's still to this day the number one injury.
Well, and it's also not very exciting topic most of the time.
What?
And so, all the ADAS and EV, we're always talking about those things. And, that's one of the things I struggle with is, as an industry, we kind of latch on to 1 or 2 things at a time and tend to push everything else off to the wayside. And we have to keep reminding people about this topic. And that's kind of why we picked this one for SEMA here, because even though it's not the exciting topic, it's still good to remind people about this kind of stuff.
Well, each one of us earlier was saying, I wish I would have. Everyone on this panel, and I think everybody with experience has said that. I wish I would have. So whether it's eye protection or hearing protection.
Experience. You've done a lot of things wrong to figure out what I should have been doing right.
Exactly.
So here's mine.
What?
Well, you're not alone.
Well, and and it's funny because growing up I was around a lot of loud machinery, and then body work, everything was loud there as well, and you just don't have time to grab the hearing protection because it's all the way in the toolbox.
Well, the air hammer doesn't bother me when I'm using it.
Right.
How's it do it when he uses it?
That's irritating as heck.
Well, and and it's kind of interesting because I know when I started at iCar and had gone through the worker protection and things like that, that 90 decibels is not that loud.
No.
Before you start having that, you can really start to do damage, and you're sitting there looking at it going like, really, I need ear protection for that?
Well, and in some shops, that can just be the air compressor running.
Yeah.
If you're close to that air compressor, it might be putting out that level before you even grab a tool.
But I think my wife has lost some of her hearing from my past snoring. I know I've reached way over 90 decibels in the past.
Well, and this is one that a lot of people don't think about when they're welding too, because all of a sudden you get a spark that just in the right spot and rolls into your ear. That's not an experience you want to have either. So that's one I never even thought of until I started at iCar, and somebody told the story of how it happened to them, and I thought,
Yeah.
this is not going to be a pleasant day.
There's times when you're welding, when a spark lands on you someplace, you just don't move. That's all I'm saying.
I hate the smell of flesh burning
Yeah.
when I know I'm the only one close enough.
Yeah, or I realize I'm welding on something and my leg's starting to get warm because my sock caught on fire. It's like, all right, I probably should have been wearing different pants that had longer cuffs or something. I was not in shorts.
But you have seen people weld in shorts. I guarantee it.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Guilty.
And they get the suntan up to here. And,
Right.
yeah.
So, gloves. This is one that so many people, I think, kind of take for granted because welding gloves, but even the mechanics gloves with the impact resistance and stuff like that can really do a lot to save your hands in the long run. And I think this is another one that the shops, everybody in the shop, severely underutilizes.
So I'll add one to this list because a good friend of mine who's a technician at a shop back east, he spent an extended time out of work and he's a veteran technician, been working in the shop doing structural repairs for many years. He ended up just having a bad day at the shop where he caught his hand on a piece of sharp metal and ripped right up his arm, and there was some major medical outcome from that. And they actually, as a shop, had to take and implement Kevlar gloves and forearm protectors as part of their PPE package in the shop environment. And many of us, we go for years and years without having a bad day, but again, another lottery ticket I don't want to buy.
Well, one of my I wish I had was the anti-vibration gloves. To this day, I still have a lot of wrist problems, still have a lot of pain, numbness, and I didn't even know they were a thing when I was in the field, sanding and doing all that.
Right.
That's one of the things I wish I had known about and was educated about, and that I had used. And I think you said something earlier that was kind of cracked me up, was if you're using a solvent and it's melting your gloves, you're probably using the wrong gloves. But how many times do you see that? You're cleaning a gun. Oh man, I got to put another pair of gloves on. Yeah. These gloves are melting. Let me get another pair of the same gloves. So.
Yeah, probably not going to get any better that way.
No.
Probably need to be a different material.
Well, and so for the Skills USA competition, one of the state competitions, a student was sanding their fender with a DA. And somehow they slipped with the DA and ended up cutting tendons in their hand.
Oh, wow.
And, this was somebody that was, he had a family and children and his livelihood, and now he lost the use of I believe it was his left hand, because he had to go in and get emergency surgery and reattach tendons because his hands got cut from a DA. So it's not something, you're not cutting something, it's not a grinder. It's just a DA, but that sandpaper and the edge caught the tendons and just sliced so quickly that he ended up having to go to the hospital.
Oh, and a cutoff wheel will do that to you in a minute. Gets hung up in the wrong spot, that's not good.
And that's one of the things that, the cutoff wheel, people are thinking about that, where a DA, I can't feel the dent as well and things like that. But even there, you can get hurt.
You hope they're thinking about it. But I've seen the results of the exploded cutoff wheel that caught somebody right there with no eye protection, and it's not pretty.
So we can't get together and not talk about EV.
It's impossible.
It
Hey,
really is.
It's all over here at SEMA too. They got a whole section over there in the North Hall on it. And, beyond just OEM production vehicles, the modifications that are going on are impressive.
Well, if you look at the number of, EVs are getting really popular now, but think about it, for the last 20 years, we've had hybrid vehicles out there that had the same potential to kill you. That high voltage in a hybrid vehicle it's less than the EVs, but it's still not healthy for your body in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
Well, I think the biggest difference between the EVs of today and the hybrids of 10, 15 years ago, the battery packs are so much larger now, and they're so much closer to harm's way, and there's so much more potential energy in them that it's something that we're lucky. I haven't heard of any major accidents here in the U.S., but I don't want to hear about them anytime soon. I hope that never happens, because people are thinking about this before they even begin to work on the vehicles.
Mm-hmm. And I fully believe that every technician in the shops should go through, at the very least, our safety precautions online class for electric vehicles. That's a bare minimum. They should do more, but I just think it's such an important thing out there to protect people. And you still have people that don't know, people that don't understand. And, I've talked to people around, and I love how some technicians, they like to debate it. They say, well, I don't like electric vehicles. I don't want to work on them. Well, you don't have a choice, right? Because they're here to stay, and they're only going to get more popular. It has never mattered whether us as technicians like the vehicle or not. I never liked a certain brand of vehicle, but I had to work on it all the time.
That's true. So with the EV topic and the PPE aspect, I think about our traditional vehicles, gasoline-powered or diesel. If it had a fuel leak, you usually saw it, smelled it. There was clear evidence. With our EVs, if there's wire damage, you may or may not know. It may not be flagging a code or cause a master caution light or something like that. So as we approach the unknown, we take the approach of protecting ourselves so that we're multiple mistakes away from a bad day. And until we've proven that that vehicle is safe, proven that the vehicle's been shut down or whatever needs to be done to the vehicle properly, we should take those added precautions. That way, if we do have a bad day, it doesn't hurt us.
All right, so safety attire for the shop. I know the one that we talked about welding.
Flip-flops in the shop, is that where we're going?
Yeah, I've seen that before too, and that guy had a very bad day when he was not knowing how he was supposed to be welding properly, and that big cherry that he was creating because he really didn't have it set up correctly.
I've never seen that before on my welds.
Yeah, and it fell, and it went on the top of his foot and burned in, and he couldn't get it off. It was on there, and it was horrible, and I never wanted to have that happen to me.
Yeah, in paint suits, we talked about eliminating the source, but we still have to protect ourselves. It still will enter the body through the pores of your skin. I know in some of us older guys, we never liked to wear paint suits because they were hot. But all the advances are just amazing. If you look around here at SEMA, some of the advanced paint suits and fresh air respirators, it will make all the difference in the world.
So, the eye wash stations are one I am so glad I've never had to use, because to stick my face into there and open my eyes and have water blasting into it, I don't know if I could even open my eyes to do it. That would have been the worst thing possible for me.
So I had one day, we had a young apprentice in the shop. He came over, he said, "Do you have a magnet?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got a magnet for finding screws and bolts and whatever that I dropped down the drain." And I said, "What do you need it for?" He says, "Well, I got some metal in my eye. I want to get it out."
Oh, Lord.
I'm like, "We need to go introduce you to the eye wash station."
Well, and the safety shower. A lot of shops don't have these, but it's something that is needed. I was working in one place where a guy, he reached up to grab a can of paint, and the lid wasn't on good, and it all over him. And you have situations like that. At that point, the longer that it sits on your body, the more it's absorbing in your skin. It's burning your, So if you have a safety shower, you can eliminate that.
So I'll make a comment about the eye wash stations. If you've got one kind of like we've got here that's going to have, I want to say, its own dedicated water supply, that's one thing, and that should get changed out periodically depending on the particular unit and the design. But if you have one that's plumbed through your shop public plumbing or water source, you should go out there, and particularly with the eye wash station, you should operate it now and then, because we actually tested ours in the shop pretty recently, and it had not been operated in a while. And when I turned it on, there was a little bit of corroded water coming out initially. And so we've put ourselves on a routine of operating it at least once a month, make sure we've got clean water always there. We've never needed to use it there at the tech center, but as we look at something like that, I certainly wouldn't want to have to run over there and turn that on and have rusty water coming out into my eyes.
Well, work coming from a school environment before this, we used the eye wash station a lot.
Okay.
Whether it was clear coat splash in the eye or some metal or sand or something. So,
Well, in the ventilated mixing room, one of the shops I worked at, probably about a year before I started there, painter went in there in the morning, clicked on the lights, and he got blown out the door.
Whoa.
And they had, what were supposed to be the explosion-proof lights. They had ventilation, but it wasn't quite operating the way it was supposed to be, and somebody had shut something off that they shouldn't have, and this guy, he was crippled the rest of his life and never worked again.
Oh my gosh.
And so, I mean, it does happen out there, and that's where we have to be really diligent about some of this stuff.
So ultimately, we're out of time. It's up to you to protect yourself, take all the proper precautions with whatever you're doing in the shop environment or wherever it happens to be, even on home projects. Sometimes we're exposing ourselves. So take care of your health, and your body will take care of you. Thank you all.
thank you.